nothing is growing around, as you say, David. If you can find the seeds and you can provide food for your family and nourishment, there's a lot to be said for that, I suppose.
Yeah, and you have to take that into consideration. I mean, are you going to starve or are you going to use an LED light?
Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age Conversations covers changes in our climate due to a new and intensifying grand solar minimum. In the media, overlooking, downplaying, or burying cold weather changes occurring on our planet. This is in order to keep the global warming agenda steaming full speed ahead. I do this podcast and radio program because we need to begin conversations on how to adapt our food growing strategies long before 2030 as agricultural zones shift, affecting global crop output, but very few mainstream media outlets are talking about the most important issue of our time, cold weather crop losses. Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the Grand Solar Minimum? Then join me for Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David DuByne.
Really going to boil down to something like this. And, think domes, just as you're referring to the community there, because that's what would resist, the hail damage and also the heavier winds that will be accompanying. So what we saw last year and, with the Beast from the East and the Super Freeze 2.0, you had those two storms. During those same times, those Almeria greenhouse down in Spain were frozen out, bashed out with the hail, and ripped up from the wind. That's a major vegetable growing area that you had shortages everywhere in Northern Europe, UK, Ireland, whatever. There's shortages everywhere from just the basic vegetables because the other places where they were growing it were bashed to smithereens by hail and wind. And you saw last year the prices of what the zucchini squashes and you couldn't get basil and there are all kind of other things you couldn't get, lettuces and whatever. And there's some stuff was just not available or was double, triple price just because of the inavailability. So if you're able to grow your own, then who cares? But there is going to be a lot of trade-offs going forward. The environment's going to take a very, very, very back seat to survival. If you're going to starve to death or your family's going to starve or you're going to use a non-eco-friendly product, I guarantee you're going to use a non-eco-friendly product to stay alive. And that's just the way it's going to be. Like I said, there's going to be a lot of psychological changes moving forward of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. Right now we're living in a very static, very sterile society where there's a bunch of rules and norms to adhere to because everything works fine. But as soon as things don't work fine, people are going to find solutions to the problems that they need to solve around their homes first. And if it involves using oil instead of a, breakaway orange-based organic detergent, I guarantee they're going to go and use the oil because it's going to save their life. Yeah, domes, and that was my point. Go domes, D-O-M-E-S, domes.
That's okay.
Dome builders.
Just a reminder for people that it's 7 days before cannibalism kicks in. So just a reminder. Steve, more questions because we want to focus on the solutions, but we'll try and get through the questions and then we'll talk about the solutions.
We do. There's a lot of information popping in up on the chat rooms there in relation to the effects and dangers of LED. Well, we haven't quite looked at that in depth at the moment, so we can't really comment too much. But someone said, okay, we know aspartame is bad. Sugar, if it was to get expensive, then we should use aspartame. We're not pointing fingers or, going down that road. We're just saying that in a time of crisis, basically, if you have an LED light and that can help grow a seed into something that you and your family can eat, well, you'll do it because, we've all heard, I'm sure anyone who's a parent has heard the cries of a hungry child and you just want to satisfy that need. Anyway, we shall continue. Graham was wondering, David, can you ask David, what are his thoughts on Monsanto being absorbed by Bayer? Is this the beginning of the end for the GM empire?
On an industrial scale, I think it will still stay around. But in terms of average person trying to grow their own food, eventually after these first generation GMO seed stocks run out, you can't replant them anyway. So they would never come to seed again in a local community that was growing their own food. So they'll have to rely back on heirloom seeds again so you can make sure you get a yield of seeds themselves coming out so then they could replant. And you have to save about 25% of your seed. So if you think you're going to get 100 pounds of something, I'm sorry, you're only going to be able to keep 75 because you need to keep the other, what would have grown out, you need to keep that for seed to replant for the next season. So when we talk about totals coming out of the fields, 1 does not equal 1. 1 equals 0.75 because you always need to keep a quarter of that for the replant. GMO, I think, is going to be a thing of the past. Yeah, but it's going to come more local again, I do believe. Just go back, and I think we're going to reverse back into the late 1800s, early 1900s in terms of the way we live and plant and share.
What about just in relation to seeds and DNA? We heard recently, a couple of weeks back on one of our shows, it was suggested that if you are going to plant some seeds, and it will be an idea to get those seeds, put them into your mouth first and leave them there for a moment or two. And then it was suggested that your DNA will be imprinted onto or into the seed before growing. Have you heard anything about that?
Yeah, I sure have, and it's very, very interesting because I know when you put frequency to seeds, it can change them as well. There were a couple persons also using electrical vibration and electrical frequency into the seeds to change the output. You know, they were getting what is traditional corn that we know. It grows straight and it has several, ears on it. They were putting electricity into it and getting out double stalks with like 12 heads on each stalk, and kind of a hybrid between let's say sorghum and corn, but on a corn plant. And they were getting all kinds of extreme versions of the initial plant, whatever hybrid species it was. But when they hit it with the electrical vibration, it changed also. So yeah, when you talk about Nikola Tesla, the whole universe is vibration and frequency. So what can you change in that? We are vibrational frequency ourselves. So can you impart that onto a seed? It's a living thing as well. But they've done the experiments where they put the writing on top of water and they can change it. Writing the word love on top of your water and talking to your water can change the frequency. These are ancient teachings. We're going to go back to this again when we plant our seeds or when we do our water or when we do anything. Imagine that, these seeds need to get you through the next winter, and everybody's going to be praying on those seeds, literally putting their focus and energy into the seed batch. So please give us the best harvest you've ever given because we really need the food, please. Will that change the output? That really is to be seen. I'm so interested in this, actually.
Well, they've actually done that. They've actually proven that talking to your plants does actually make a difference on playing music. I hate to mention Prince Charles, but he's a big believer of doing this. And with his Duchy of Cornwall, he's involved in doing that as well. So there must be something in it if the royals are doing it on their food. We have a couple of more questions, and then we'll get into solutions. Steve?
Yeah, I'd be afraid to put seeds in my mouth. Imagine putting potato seeds or seedlings into your mouth, and then you harvest your potatoes and they look like you. Anyway, Tim wants to know if you were aware, David, of the free energy devices that have been made but have not been made available to the general public.
Yes, and I even have some of the patents that Tesla had filed. And I've been working with a couple magnetic motor designs myself. And magnetic motors are going to be far easier than trying to put something together at Tesla's range there. So they're magnets, and they oppose each other. You just need two opposing disks, and then you get those to spin against each other using the Earth's magnetic field. Super simple. But, with the Tesla devices, one of the things they were finding is that the output of the energy was just astounding. You need something half the size of a washing machine to power like 3 American homes, including air conditioning and ovens and televisions and everything else in between. And one of those little devices for multiple homes, that bankrupts traditional archaic business.
Yeah, and of course, Tesla has been doing free energy. I mean, he was proving it on the White House lawn in 1902. So we've had it for years. So we are going back in time. We're going back in the advancement of technology. We're not going forward. We're going back. And that's the trouble. They've had more advanced technology in the past than we do now. And people don't realise that. And that's why we need all these patents of the free energy stuff. I mean, we should have anti-gravitational aircrafts. We should be flying around in cars that are anti-gravity, but we're not, because the oil cartels and big money is stopping it all. And, car engines working on water, Stanley Meyer, H2O. So all this technology is out there, but they're not giving it to us because they know no one's a big farmer. They're involved with the food. Obviously, Bayer, Monsanto, GMOs, it's all got to do with the big corporations controlling everything. We have a couple more questions, and because I want to get into solutions with you, David. So, Steve.
Okay, very, very quickly, we got two. Joan was just wondering about Shungite. We spoke recently about Shungite as well, and maybe if we were to use Shungite on our plants and Shungite in the water, that could also be beneficial. Any information on Shungite, David?
No, I'm unfamiliar with that.
Okay, that's something.
If you can explain it a little better, maybe I know it as a different term or a different name, and if you do, then I could possibly jump in on that conversation. But what you termed it as there, I'm unfamiliar with that.
Yeah, we'd say to you, just check out Shungite. It's actually you get it from Russia, and we've had people use Shungite with their beehives, and the production of honey has increased because of the bees love the energy from the Shungite. What happens is with the Shungite is that it's the properties are, when man creates something like Wi-Fi mobile phones, it's all done in a counterclockwise vortex. And what Shungite does is, Shungite is clockwise, which is the way our body is. So it counteracts the effect of what man's devices are doing. That's the effect of. So we have, myself and Steve wear pendants with Shungite on it, and you can actually have key rings, and you can actually paint your walls with Shungite powder, and has loads of benefits, put it that way. So something that is worthwhile checking into. We'd recommend you do that. Well, we're actually talking about the solutions. What I was going to say was, last time when we had Hurricane Ophelia, and I had the actual lights on the house and nobody else had power, and I was going to say, if somebody came up to you and said, how come you had power and nobody else did? I was going to say, ring Jimmy in the ESB. Tell Jimmy that Alan said it's okay, and he'll switch your power on. Yeah. I don't know. I was going to do a wind-up. I don't know whether I will or not. Now, okay, David, let's focus on the solutions. We have about 15 minutes left. We're just talking about the solar energy generators, the solar generators that we built and we use successfully just to get emergency power in the house. And anybody can get them, anybody can build them. We actually have video tutorials on our YouTube channel of how we built them, and so people can go there. Plus we have a transfer switch to show you how the transfer switch works, switching over from the household mains. But the other things you were mentioning there was about planting, growing food in your house, pot plants and all that kind of stuff, and growing food. What other solutions do we have to start prepping for? What other solutions do you have that we can do?
Well, it would be the lowest hanging fruit first, and that's no pun intended. But, just things that you would do if a hurricane's coming, or, it's just some of these things. Would you sit around and say, well, I'm going to have no water, I hope the store's open? No. You would go and you would have water available. Now, instead of having a 5-gallon jug, perhaps you'd have a 55-gallon drum ready for you. And again, some long-term food storage. How about just some simple dried beans, rice, and other types of possible protein-rich sustenance that you can find out there? The bulk food section, how many people visit that in the supermarket anymore? Most people go for something that's already prepared, made in a factory, that they can pop out of a box and eat. Well, how about going back to, you buy a pound of dried beans and you just need to learn how to soak it and grow it. How about you buy bulk wheat, which then you could sprout? How about 2 birds, 1 stone, where you find those types of seeds that you could eat and prepare for food, but then at the same time you could sprout it if you need to. So sprouts will grow in a few days and you can have some food right away. Like, there's all these solutions of long-term food storage, the bulk items, the water preparation. You're going to have to think about your power, but the safeties with that. If your power's out across the entire neighborhood and you're the only ones with lights on in your house and you're broadcasting, lights in my house, you're going to have some unwanted visitors because you're the only one in the neighborhood with lights on, and they know you'll have a power generation device. But with that said, what can you forage around your house? Like in the natural environment, I know I can walk out in the back of my yard or in my neighborhood or in a forest somewhere, and I could bring home a bag of at least leaves and berries, mushrooms maybe if it's in the right time of the year, of things that I could find naturally. What about the root plants around where you live? How many of those do you know that you can eat? Canna lilies. I mean, how many people would probably walk by a canna lily field and starve to death when you could eat all those plants, the roots out of it? So many solutions. Is basically think about living in a pioneering lifestyle. Learn what your grandparents learned, and that'll kind of be the easiest steps first. I mean, all these books. There's ag centers around in most city. There's foraging clubs in every city, you know, like looking for natural foods out in the forest. There's gardening clubs in every city. There's organic farming communities in every city. There's really no excuse for you not to be getting ready because the resources are around you and those communities are the people that you're going to need for the support anyway. So it's like networking and building your skill set and getting the physical together. The physical, and I mean by, you know, whether it be shovels, seeds, beans, food, whatever it is. It's going to take a combination of a few things.
But I think something you said there, which I think I will do and I find interesting. I have a couple of neighbours who are in their 70s, and the lady is actually from a very hardy Scottish lady from the Outer Hebrides.
You can't eat her.
No, I can't eat her. But she is someone who knows all about this stuff because she grew up doing it. So I'm going to actually see her during the week, and I'm going to say to her, you know, in our locality, where are the places that we can go to actually forage and stuff that we can get for food? Because, as you say, you could die of starvation on something that you could actually eat. It's all about knowledge. It's all about knowing what to do and how to do it. And I think that's pretty good. Now, if there's local groups, you know, Ireland is kind of, I know we mentioned Seamus had this group down where he is, where they actually have a community and they're growing stuff. But there, things like that, co-ops like that are few and far between, I think, in Ireland. We don't have that many. And so on a local point of view, it's up to people to start getting together and organising their own prepping groups and prepping circles. So they have the knowledge between them and they can help each other. So if anything happens, for the people in the city, well, I don't really know what you can do in the city because the city's going to be the worst place in a crisis to be. The country at least you have a fighting chance.
Right, and think about that, Alan. You're going to have to be able to buy some of these things. And imagine if your debit cards or credit cards don't work any longer. What would be a secondary medium of exchange or tertiary? We could use bartering. That'd be great. But think about cryptocurrency as well. You touched on the tech there and the AI and the tech a little bit. But what about cryptocurrency, learning how to use that? Because I do believe that is going to be part of the new monetary system that will emerge out of this semi-reduction or contraction into what's coming in our traditional economies. Now, people always will have a way to buy and sell and trade, but if if the pound's not working, the euro's not working, dollar's not working, and from anything in between is having less value and people don't consider it as stable in transit, let's say it takes 20 days, 30 days, or even just your neighbors, whatever it is, people aren't going to believe in the value of the paper money as they have in these last few years. But there'll always be another alternative to that. Learning what cryptocurrency is, I'm not advocating, any one or shape. I'm just saying the tech that's there and the availability for you to buy, sell, trade with an agreed upon medium electronically without any third party is going to be another means that we're going to use as we transition through all of these changes. Yeah. For sure. Learn what the tech is. I'm not even, I didn't even mention one yet. I'm just saying learn the tech because we're going to use it as new money.
Well, we actually don't go near the crypto stuff because we have inside information to know that that's not exactly what you think it is. And the fact is that if we have an EMP and it blows out everything, crypto is going to be pointless because your technology won't work. What you need to work with is your skills and what you have in your hands. That's your labour. That's going to be important because if we are sent back to the late 1800s for whatever reason, then crypto. Take for last week. Last week we had 2 days of power down, and okay, there was a little bit of battery in my phone, but if that was over a week, we'd have no technology. So unfortunately, there's two reasons there. One, the EMP and a power down situation where you won't be able to use technology, and two, we've heard about crypto being not exactly what it is. So unless you have it in your hand, you don't own it. We're taking it based on interviews we've done with guests that we've had on the show and information that we've received. But so I think the knowledge, having the knowledge is more valuable than anything. Knowing how to make stuff, how to grow stuff, and how to forage, and then having groups of people around you that are on the same wavelength, I think that is gold dust. That's what we need to focus on.
Yeah, so let me mention that EMP for a second. Now, you talk about the charge that's coming from the sun, and when it lands on these high-tension power wires, what it's going to do is put an extra 2 volts on a line per kilometer. That is absolutely going to overcharge whatever part of the planet it hits. Now, the misnomer is that an EMP comes and it sweeps over the entire planet from stem to stern, from top to bottom, left to right, and everything's affected on the entire planet, and we go back to the Stone Age. That is not the way it really works. Even during the Carrington event, which you referenced, and that's the most well-known event that came off the CME, the coronal mass ejection, that had huge effects on all the telegraph wires, et cetera, that you're talking about. That was only really incredibly damaging in North America and parts of Europe only. The rest of the planet was not affected, even though they were also wired up slightly. You know, there was wires down in Asia at the time and other parts of, say, Eastern Europe and just even in India at the time. But they weren't affected. Some parts of the globe were absolutely just decimated to the point where it fried and burned people and houses caught on fire and all these kind of stations and everything you're talking about, wires melting. But then on the other side of the globe, nothing happened at all. So when we talk about the EMP, yeah, it's about how intense will it be? What part of the planet's sun facing during this time? What's the tilt? What season is it in? Is it more of an equinox time, or is it a solstice time where everything's at the uber extreme of the bend of our planet in a season? It just depends. There's so many variables coming into these EMPs, but I firmly believe that there will be at least some places on the planet for sure that will survive through that, regardless if another place gets totally scrapped down to zero. There'll be another place that will be functional on the other side. So when they talk about building out these new generators and new type of infrastructure, they're saying it could take up to 3 years to get component parts back in, because they do not believe either a 100% total global event would occur during this time. It would be part of the planet that would be affected. But then getting the supply chain to get these large, you know, we just don't build normally something like that off the shelf. You have to have those custom made, these generators, et cetera. So it would be a concerted effort to get everything up and running again. But I firmly believe, like I said, there'll be other parts of the planet that'll be unaffected, even with a giant CME.
No, I totally agree. It's Russian roulette, because it depends on which part of the planet is facing the sun at the time CME happens. The EMP could be sun, could be a rogue state, or it could be the deep state doing their last bit of trouble before they finish, before they die. Maybe it's one of their satellites or something. You don't know. We don't know. So it's all about being prepared and being organised. So it's just, you know, as I say, the solar generators, we're happy with the performance that we had, and we used them. Was brilliant. And although we have limited power from them, it was definitely helpful. But you got great ideas there, definitely great ideas on the prepping and get ready. Now, I know there's loads of people out there who are prepping, and I don't know, what would you say? Would you say prep for 2 weeks, 2 months? What would be the best thing to do just to be on the safe side?
Well, a lot of preparation experts say about 3 months. 3 months, because that would allow everything to unfurl in those first 90 days or 30 days of chaos. There'd be a lot of people who would have 30 days of food or 60 days, but those will, you know, that'll eventually dwindle if they don't know how to resupply and go forage or do anything, or even start a garden. Within a couple months, you'll definitely have some stuff to eat. Even in the first month, you could have some vegetable source to eat at that time. But those who are relying on all they have just stocked up, they're going to go through those supplies eventually. Exactly. So that'll generally be the people who just, you know, prep up for 2 weeks, 30 days or something like this. But almost everybody I talked to said if you're able to hunker down in a safe spot and wait out 90 days, almost all the tumultuous wave will have passed over you. And you get to be about with your community, too. It's not like you can just sit in your bunker or your house or whatever, turn off the lights at night and ride this thing out. You are definitely going to go stir crazy. Your psyche will just snap if you don't have communication with others. You'll be perpetually terrified because every noise you hear will be some kind of scary noise. So it'll be about being with others around you and having that community, because so many people ask me, well, where's the safe place going to move on the planet where it's not going to be cold, where you can still grow food, and, you know, where it's going to be safe? And my answer is always the safest place to be is the community where you already are, because you have built networks, you know people. Sometimes if you live there for a long time, you know the same people you went to high school with. So you know the same people you went to college with. You know the same people that you worked in jobs with for XYZ number of years. But that community that you've built, people know you, they trust you. You know people, you know who to trust, not trust. And, you know, that's going to be the safest place, is the community that you're actually in. versus trying to run off to an equatorial country and drop down in the middle of Indonesia by yourself and try to set up. That's just not going to work.
Yeah. Have people around you that you know. Okay, David, we've reached that time. A big thank you for coming on the show, and appreciate you sharing the information and letting people know what's going on. We have to be prepped. We have to be organised as much as we can, because the next few years the weather's going to be pretty bad. But a big thank you for coming on. I'm going to pass you over to Steve. Steve's going to get all your contact information off you, and for people to know where to find you. Steve.
Yeah, it's great information, David. I have to say you've stored up a lot of interest on both of the chat rooms there, and the links that you did give us earlier, that we had outlets where people can find more information, or is that it, or even just a couple of wise words to end the show.
Well, yeah, thank you for that. The Adapt 2030 channel on YouTube, I try to post videos 5 times a week, and the Mini Ice Age Conversations podcast, it's a tri-weekly, or sometimes if I have more material, 3 to 5 times a week. Now, with that being said, all the information we talked about tonight, I can put all of that into a PDF with all the slides that we were referencing and the stories talked about, and the global temperatures and the record ice and the record Greenland ice and all those things that were talked about. I'll put that and send it as a link also, so you can just directly click it and then download the PDF. And again, that'll come from my side. I'll just host it on my website. But I'll go ahead for any of you from OIM that were listening tonight and you want to get this information, so you have the slides so you can really discern and find out the information, look at it, pick it through yourself, photocopy these, give them to friends, back check, double check the information. Great. That is your responsibility to check the information. We can present it to you, but it's your ultimate responsibility. It falls on your shoulders to be responsible for yourself to find out if this information is correct and true for you.
Brilliant.
But I'll give you the slides, not a problem. I'll be happy to do that.
Anyway, great information there from David DuByne. And Alan was just chatting with him there during the break, and we're going to try and do a yearly hookup with David. So it'll be kind of a record where people can kind of check back and see what was David saying on OAM in 2018, 2019, 2020.
Yeah, so last year we did a 2017 with David, and obviously we just done the interview now. So next year we'll do another interview, and then each year we'll have a record of the weather changes for each year, and then we can actually track it that way. So that's pretty good. Great information. Again, it's quite kind of worrying in a way that the weather's going to get bad if we're going to have more beasts from the east, because I have to say I didn't really enjoy it. It was, you don't mind a little bit of snow, but Ireland, with a little bit of snow, Ireland grinds to a halt. But the beast from the east definitely knocked the stuffing out of the country.
It did. When you think about it, we ground to a halt, and what we got, other countries just kind of brush it to one side. They have the snow ploughs, it's moved to one side, and life goes on.
Well, I mentioned about that snow plough that we seen. I seen on the internet.
For the car.
It was $600. And basically what you do is you bungee strap the snowplow to your car, and your car becomes a snowplow. Brilliant idea. Now, obviously, these countries have them because they always have them. So Canada, you have loads of snow and everything else. But brilliant idea. So something to consider, because if it's the case that the next 15 years we're going to be getting extreme weather like the beast from the east for the winter, then having something like that is definitely going to be beneficial. Having a snowplow that you can put on your car. And again, I suppose for the summer, you need to have some kind of rain barrel or water barrel that you can actually collect the rainwater, because if there's going to be a drought, again, we had hosepipe bans, which is now being lifted up, apparently. We are allowed to use the water again in Ireland. Would you believe? Ireland being so wet. That's comical, isn't it?
We had torrential rain there last week, and there was still a hosepipe ban in place in some locations.
It's just the wrong type of water, isn't it? That's what it is.
Well, as one of our politicians said it recently, well, when I say recently, it was probably about a year ago, that water doesn't just fall from the sky,
Oh, yeah, exactly.